Right, today I'm going to show you how to do the twists for the dunes scarf and also how to join the end if you want to make it an infinity scarf. So this one features these really cool twists that are a little weird, but that's what makes it so fun. So I'm going to show you how to do those. For this sample I have Drifter DK yarn from Cowl yarns and a size H crochet hook. So for the skinnier, there's two versions of the dune scarf. There's the skinnier one like this, and then there's a thicker one like this. So I'm just doing this example with the skinnier one, which is 26 stitches across. So now I'm going to turn and I'm going to, so I've done 2 rows of double crochet, just plain double crochet. So now I'm going to slip stitch in 13 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So you could do this with any size that you wanted, but you just slip stitch across for half of the stitches. And then you're going to slip stitch one more just to get into this stitch, and then chain 3. And that counts as your first double crochet. Now this is going to be the new start of your row right here. So now I'm going to keep double crocheting across until I get to the end of the row. Okay, so now that I'm at the end of the row, I need to keep going, and this is going to be a continuation of the row. So what I need to do is you take this and you just fold it over. So now I'm going to keep double crocheting across the rest of these stitches in this row. And especially the first time you do it, it feels super wrong and weird, but I promise it's right. So there should be 13 more double crochets. And the last double crochet should be in the stitch right before that chain 3, so I'm going to make it right here. Okay, now I'm not going to join that together. Instead I'm going to chain 3, and I'm going to turn it and go back around this way. Now the tricky part here is to make sure that this is not twisted when you go back around. So you can kind of see, you have to kind of twist this around to make sure that that chain is straight as you go around. Okay, so now I'm at that point where that meets up. I've got to make sure that I'm going through these chains straight. So just straighten out that chain before you go through those stitches. Always check by making sure those are all lined up straight. And it takes a few rows to really see the pattern start to emerge. This first twist is the trickiest, definitely. After this, then it gets a little bit easier to kind of see what you're doing. So now here I've gotten back to my turn chain, so I'll do one in that turn chain. And then I'm going to turn again and go back. So the only time, actually you don't really ever join a row. You just change where your starting place is for the row. So it's a little different. I'm just working back along to do one more row, and then I'll stop and show you what it looks like at this point. One nice thing about this project is that you can use any yarn, any hook you want, and however wide you want it to be, you basically need to start with a chain that's twice that wide. So it can be really flexible, which is always nice. I think it looks really nice in tweed yarns. It's the first two I made were in tweeds. One of them was in a discontinued yarn, unfortunately. It's been discontinued now, but the second one I made was in We Crochet's City Tweed, the Aran or heavyweight City Tweed yarn, which I really liked. It glided really smoothly. It's soft. So I would recommend that if you want to do the thicker version. Or really any yarn you want. Okay. So now you can kind of see that it folds and makes this like S shape as it goes. And this is where we did that weird join. So it's not really hooked together there, but it folds onto each other. And it's really, it's confusing, I'm not gonna lie, when you first do that first row. So the trick when you do the twist is just to make sure that your top chain is straight. If your top chain is straight while you're working, then it's gonna end up folding correctly and you're gonna be okay. So this is how to do the fold and join for the Dunes scarf. And now I'm going to show you how to sew it together if you want to make the infinity version. So here, in this bigger one I've made, I haven't woven in my ends yet, but I've got this scarf. So this is the end I started on, so you can see I did that twist here, 2 rows in. It's a little hard to see because I use such dark yarn, but that's okay. And so this is the end I finished on, and it's quite wide, so I need to be able to fold this so that I can join it up to the front. Okay, so all I'm going to do with this, so this is like the way I was working, so this is where I finished off my last row, and I left a long tail to weave in my ends. I'm going to see if I can move my camera up a little bit. Okay, so you can see a little bit better now. Okay, so this is where I left off, and I've got this long end, but I need to make it so that it matches up with this side in the pattern. So if I just sew it together like this, this part doesn't have the twist that it should have, so I need to fold it before I can sew it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this end and I'm going to fold it under. And this end I'm going to fold over. And that's going to create those twists that's supposed to be there. So that when I sew it together, it's got the right pattern. Okay, so now I've got these ends. It makes that S shape, right? And I can take these ends, and now you'll see that it lines up. The S shapes match. I've got a top, and I'll be able to sew it, and it'll go around and finish on the back. So I'm going to scoot my camera back a little bit more even. Okay. So I had folded this so that it can match up with this. Because if I hadn't folded it, if I had left it like this, which is the way it was, well, now my ends don't match up. I've got this end meeting up with the middle of this fabric, so it doesn't sew together properly. So this right side gets folded under, the left side gets folded over, and now I'm ready to sew it in. So I'm going to take my end and my tapestry needle. I could also just crochet this together if I wanted to, but I've chosen to sew it. Okay, so I'm going to sew this end to this end here. And I'm just going to sew this with like a whip stitch. You could use whatever sewing stitch you'd like to sew yours together. I just know that this yarn, it's not going to be super obvious if I just whip stitch it, so it's an easy way to do it. And I'm just going every stitch along both rows. So this particular one right here I made wider and I used thicker yarn, but I made it shorter, so it's just like a regular kind of cowl size, not a bigger scarf. And this one took me 2 balls of that city tweed yarn to make, and I worked up really quickly actually, so it was kind of nice. Working all the way around, just following the 2. Once you get it started, I mean, it's a straight line, right? So even though it has that twist in it, when you're actually working, just like when you're doing the regular rows, it's just a straight line because you're just working back and forth rows, except for the twist regions. So it's pretty straightforward to sew it together as long as you get those folds lined up correctly. I hope I left enough yarn to sew it in. I feel like I might run out. I'm going to make a mental note to pick a lighter colored yarn for a project if I'm going to do a video for it. I just love this dark gray though. It's got these speckles of cream and kind of umber, like a burnt brownish color. I'm going to turn this, I can keep working easier. trying to remember, I think this colorway was called Orca, which is fitting because I'm from the Pacific Northwest. So orcas are kind of our thing. I actually got to see one for the first time, like in person. I think I might have seen one at SeaWorld once, but I was at my aunt's house the other day for my birthday, and we saw like a little pod of orcas out in the bay, and it was so cool. Got to see them breach a little bit. So that was really cool. And then I just got grumpy because a bunch of boaters were following them closer than they ought to have been. You're not supposed to get in range of orcas because, you know, that echolocation sounds, whatever they use, the boat motors can mess with them. Oh no, I lost my yarn. I actually really like having the seam so close to a fold. It's a little harder to actually seam it, but it's gonna make it so the seam is less obvious because the parts that you see most are the kind of flatter in the in-between parts rather than the parts right by the fold because, well, it's folded, so it's not as obvious. I should have left a little bit longer tail so I had more to weave in. That's okay. I'm just going to end up tying it to that other strand, I think. Okay, so I will end up weaving those ends in, just like all the rest of them. But now, you can see I've got this twist, and it looks the same all the way around because of the way that I twisted it when I sewed it. So it's kind of a chunky looking cowl. Okay, so you've got, this is the Dunes scarf, and it's sometimes kind of infuriating because you try and straighten it out and you cannot because of the way that it's made. It's intended to look kind of bunched together and funky. So don't try and straighten it out because you will just, it's an exercise in futility. And here I keep doing it. Okay, so this is the Dunes cowl scarf. Here's a skinnier one, or you could make that wider one longer and use it as a scarf. It's just a really kind of fun, different technique that all you're doing is double crocheting, but you end up with these cool twists. So I hope you like this, and I hope it was helpful, because I know those twists can be confusing, especially the first one. You feel like you're doing it completely wrong, but it actually works. So take heart, and happy crocheting. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get all the latest updates, free patterns, tutorials, whatever.